Welcome to the PC Perspective Mailbag. It is now being recorded on February 8th, 2018. This is Mailbag number 30. As you can see, Ryan is not here today. He's out in California doing something fun, probably eating good food. Maybe he's even just flying on an airplane home right now. I don't know. I'm not Ryan's keeper. Thank the Lord. But this is another exciting episode. We have many questions. Hopefully, I can answer these to your approval and hopefully in somewhat depth with a different perspective. Not PC. Anyway, on to the questions. Western Gents United. Do you know when PCIe 4.0 will be available on mainstream motherboards? Will PCIe 4.0 allow for faster NVMe drives or something like Thunderbolt 4? Well, I believe that the specification has been finally approved. Maybe that was about a couple of months ago. I know that when we talked about it at the ARM conference in November, I believe, that they had still kind of just went into, not radicalized, but ratified the specification. And they had already designed some basic controllers on the ARM architecture for use in servers and whatnot to be able to, not only communicate with the system, but communicate with other ARM cores and processors. So when will we see it on motherboards? I would expect that to be a 2019 product. Maybe spring, maybe early summer. PCIe 3.0 is still plenty fast. And the second part of the question is will it allow for faster NVMe drives? Off the bat, no, because that's going to be a combination of the memory technology used as well as the controllers. We've got to have the first PCIe 4.0 controllers, and not only that, but they've got to be able to do better throughput to the actual memory stacks involved, and possibly faster memory stacks than what we have now. Because if you look at like Samsung, their highest end stuff is about 3.6 gigabytes per second, which is hitting a near theoretical in reads, but their writes are going to be lower. Other guys, like my digital SSD, they're at about 3.2 gigabytes per second in reads and 2.4 gigabytes around there in writes. And so there's some leeway there that certainly if we got PCIe 4.0, potentially we could have faster NVMe drives, but you've got to have, there's two other links in the chain that we have to address, and that's controllers have to not only support PCIe 4.0, but they've got to support faster reads and writes, and we got to have memory that can handle that. So it's going to be probably another, we're going to see some new stuff in 2019 related to that. It will be a boost, but it's not just going to be only because of PCIe 4.0. Next question. Michael Brody. Assuming that a game is not patched for performance improvements by the developer, are we likely to see additional performance improvements over time due solely to the new GPU drivers? I sometimes notice performance gains in some games following driver updates, even though the release notes don't specifically mention such improvements. And the answer to that is yes. You may not see huge improvements, but the guys at AMD, NVIDIA, they're constantly working on their drivers to get better throughput, to more adequately utilize the GPU silicon so that it's doing work faster. They're going to, and usually they talk about it in release notes, if they provide updates or optimizations to certain titles, but they may also do, say, for example, hey, we're using Unreal Engine. Hey, we found a new optimization path, and this is going to apply to any game based on this UE 3 point whatever or 4 point whatever game. So yes, you're going to see improvements through time. Well, unless you're AMD and you release a driver that broke some DX9 games. Admittedly, they did fix it, but it's not always a perfect world, and I'm certain that NVIDIA has had some issues like that in the past. I just can't remember them offhand. Vaguely do, but it's what happens when you get old. Your mind just goes to crap. It's also probably because we like bourbon. Is that legal to do on TV? Thank God we're not on TV. Next question. Antonio Cunningham of the Cunningham clan. What kind of hard drive would you recommend for storing Steam games? I've maxed out my current 2 terabyte and I'm specifically considering a larger Western Digital red or blue drive. Well, I can give you a couple of things. Alan, someone had asked Alan this on one of the previous videos, and he had recommended some of the red drives or the NAS specific drives. So apparently the NAS drives have a larger window, and I'm probably butchering this, for kind of error issues, write issues, whatever. And so there's the possibility that it could become corrupt because of that. However, if you've got Steam games, you can always just delete the games and re-download them. Now, for myself, I use a Toshiba 4 terabyte drive. It's got 128 meg cache, and I bought it for like $120. I think that they're currently around that. It maxes out around 200 megabyte per second, and the lowest I see it go is about 150 megabyte per second. So if you're looking for good, fast, quick, large storage, that's a really good solution. I've talked to some other people who have bought that product over the past couple of months, and they've been really, really happy with it. And Toshiba, if you look at Backblaze's latest, their defect rate is low. I mean, it's right around there of HGST's, Hitachi. Western Digital is getting kind of bad in some areas on them, and Seagate, of course, is, yeah, I wouldn't touch those drives. But I've been really happy with the Toshiba. People have complained about being loud, but I don't hear it. I've got all my Steam games on there. They load up quick. I've got other games on there like World of Warships, World of Tanks. And again, they load up really quick. It's been a really solid drive. I've enjoyed it. It doesn't get too hot. It's got really good throughput. What more can you ask for? It's still one of the cheaper 4 terabyte drives on the market. So I would, I'd give it a look. DJ Noob. I previously used my PC's Windows 7 installation to upgrade to Windows 10. But now I'd like to upgrade my CPU, motherboard, and RAM. What's the deal with installing Windows 10 after such an upgrade? Will I be able to use the installation currently on my drive with the new components, or will Microsoft force me to buy a new key? Well, officially, you might have to buy a new copy or license of Windows and apply that, because I believe Windows 10, whatever, when you activate it, it takes some basic information like MAC address and whatnot off of your motherboard. So when you swap out motherboards, it comes back and says, hey, something's not right, you need to reactivate Windows. So if you're getting a new CPU, motherboard, and memory, in theory, and don't tell people at Microsoft this, you can install it all without changing the OS. It'll install all the new drivers, reconfigure itself to a new CPU, whatever. And it'll work, but then it'll come up and say you need to activate. And you try to do that, and it says, no, you don't want to do that. And that's when you get the phone number of the Microsoft people, and you dial in, and you actually talk to a person. And you say, hey, my motherboard burned out, or my CPU died, and I had to replace my motherboard. It's the same case, same video card, same hard drive, same power supply, everything, but my motherboard died, or CPU died, and so I updated it to this. I'm pretty sure they will give you an activation number over the phone. You activate it, and you'll be happy, because all those same other components are there, just major ones are missing. And Microsoft has been good to me in the past when I've had actually motherboards die, and I've had activation problems with that. So hopefully no lawyers will come knocking at my door. But that's one thing you can try. No guarantee of success. They may just tell you to go saw it off and get a new copy of Windows 10. But in my experiences in the past, they've been pretty good to me and have given me activation when, like I said, a motherboard has actually died. So take that as you will. Ometkultli. Oh, fudge. I have no idea what that guy's know. Ometkultli. Sure, why not? When are we going to see 8-core 16-thread mobile APU? It's going to be a while. I mean, AMD has just released the Ryzen 4-core 8-thread. If you look at many of the mainstream processors out there, they're all 4-core 8-thread, like the Intel i7. What do I have here? Well, the 6800K, 7800K. Why am I drawing a blank? Their new 8700, of course, is a 6-core 12-thread. But the majority of stuff out there are physically 4-core, and some of them hyper-threaded, so 8 threads. And we're not going to see that for a while. I would say 2020 for an 8-core 16-thread, because a lot of OEMs may kind of like the bigger numbers, but in the end, how much software does the average person have that requires that amount of cores? And AMD is not going to sacrifice any more silicon that they have to. Same with Intel. If they're making a low-end chip that's going to have a graphical component on it, they're going to make those die as small as possible to fit what they consider the needs of the users who are willing to spend that. So it's going to be a while. Again, I would think 2020. It wouldn't surprise me if 2019, with a refresh of the APU, that we may actually see 6-core CCX from AMD, which would make things pretty interesting in not only the APU, but also on the regular desktop Ryzen 2s. Now, I'm just talking theoretical. I don't have any, concrete roadmaps for this. But I would possibly expect that around then. 2019, 6-core CCX maybe. I'm probably wrong. But it's a decent bet. And it would give AMD a little bit of boost against Intel. Especially if Intel stays with, the 2-core, 4 hyper-thread for the low-end stuff. But I guess we'll see. But it would be an interesting step for sure. And with going to 12 nanometer and possibly 7 nanometer in 2019, yeah, they can afford, they afford the extra die space to do such a thing. Moving along, Emerald Flame. Alan has mentioned a couple of times that a lot of M.2 heatsinks aren't optimal for NVMe drives because most of them cool the flash, which benefits from higher temperatures instead of just the controller. What about XPoint or Crosspoint? Does its memory see similar endurance gains from running warmer like NAND, or would it be possible the cooling would benefit Crosspoint? Well, as this guy had mentioned, there are some cooling strips on some NVMe drives, and motherboard guys have coolers that are included. And as Alan had said, with a lot of the current flash, running a little warmer actually helps endurance. And with Crosspoint, running a little warmer might, in fact, help it, because Crosspoint relies on phase change memory. You've got 2 different phases. You've got Well, actually, you've got kind of three. You've got a crystalline phase, a molten phase, and then a non-crystallized solid phase. So its resistivity depends on which phase it is. Now, if they're writing to it, what it does is it applies a certain amount of voltage, so it heats up the transistor. It gets to a point where it's not liquid, it's not molten, but it's mobile enough that it starts to crystallize. And that crystallized unit has different resistivity from the non-crystallized. So then it writes it at this lower voltage. Now to erase it, it goes to a much, much, much higher voltage, and it actually melts that. I think that Alan said it up to 600 C is applied to a very, very small space on that. And then it takes away the voltage quickly, and when it re-solidifies, it doesn't have time to actually crystallize. So if you run it at a higher temperature, in theory, you might get a little bit better performance because they don't have to apply as much voltage, maybe, to get into the crystallize. And also at a higher temperature, maybe those crystallization, recrystallization, and melting changes happen. I don't know. I have to get a different view from Alan. I asked him today, but he's not around, and so I had to give the Josh BS answer. But I think in theory it would be a little bit easier to make those transitions if your chip is hotter at that point. I mean, it's not ever going to reach the point where the whole thing is just going to crystallize. At least you hope not. But at the same time, less power is having to be applied to these individual transistors, or cells rather, than if it's, cooled down 10, 15 degrees centigrade. It's a interesting follow-up that we'll have to do with Alan. Why Me asks, what, if anything, are the three big manufacturers, Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron, doing to address the memory shortage, and why doesn't someone like TSMC or Glofo enter the memory fabrication market, considering the big three have seen profit margins almost double in the last year? Well, in the past several years, we've seen a consolidation of memory guys. And it seems like if there were too many memory guys, not enough were making any kind of profit. And so I think we're kind of have to look at this as a balancing act. Now, there have been some accusations and some lawsuits about price fixing. And I think that something was found last year against some of the big guys, and they've had to adjust their pricing. And we've seen a little bit of memory prices go down. Manufacturing-wise, why would TSMC and Glofo get into that? They don't want to have an external-facing group that only sells one thing. Like, hey, we've got TSMC branded memory that we sell to other guys. Then you've got to start working on distribution, sales channels, stuff like that. They'd rather just stay as a pure play foundry for other guys. And also the processes used for memory, the mix is kind of different than typical ASICs. You're not looking necessarily for transistor switching speed. You're looking more for less leakage, high density. You're going to have lower power operation, hopefully. And it just it's two very different type of designs that may not be appropriate. So TSMC or Glofo, if they were to offer memory stuff, not like SRAM that's built in on ASICs as caches, but regular DRAM, flash, it is a significant difference in materials and how they process it. And so they would have to do some significant changes to their lines to be able to get that to work. And I think in the end, it's just not worth it. Samsung, SK Hynix, Micron, they're all constantly researching smaller and smaller processes different materials, ways to make memory faster, cheaper, whatever. But, it's the memory glut is certainly not here. And we're at a point with mobile devices and PCs and consoles and everything else, and Internet of Things, that it requires memory, and nobody's really just kind of caught up with that. I think probably in Q2 to early Q3, we're going to start seeing memory prices start going back down again because they're pumping out memory as much as they can. We're going to see changes in the market where, we're not everybody's going to keep buying mobile stuff. And so we're going to have, a refresh here. It's going to take a lot of memory, and then it's going to slow down. So as the build up to like the Galaxy S9, next generation Apple stuff, LG, all the Chinese cell phones, they probably ordered a lot of memory last quarter and the quarter before that has led to kind of the price that we have here. And that's going to slow down. It's cyclical. It'll get there. But I don't think any of the three are doing anything huge like planning out 8 more megafabs to do memory. They're increasing production where they can. They're building where it makes sense. And I guess we'll see. But yeah, I think in the next 2 quarters we're going to see some decent cuts in memory prices. At least I'm hoping so. JT asks, Ryan, can you explain the difference between multi-rail and single-rail settings for a PSU? Why would you want to use multi versus single? My new AX1600i has the option in Corsair Link to change it. The default is multi-rail. Now, this would probably be a great question for Lee, but I will try to answer it as best as I can. With multi-rail, you're going to have better efficiency overall than if it's just a large single rail. In theory, you're going to have a cooler power supply if you do multi-rail as compared to one large single rail, pushing all those amps, watts. It takes a toll. And so if you look at your instruction manual, you will see which cables go to what rail. And if you take your time, you can then apply those different rails to different parts of your system. So you've got a rail for your motherboard. You've got a different rail for your graphics card. You've got a third rail, for your SSDs or your spinning hard drives. You got a different rail that you do your cold cathode ray lighting. And, that'll probably blow up, and you're going to be happy that all those other components on a different rail. So it's not a bad thing to have multi-rail. You just need to pay attention to what plugs go to which rail, and then plan out how you're going to apply that across your entire system. If you just rely on one single rail for all your components, it's going to heat up and it's going to eventually pop if it's pulling in too much juice. But if you carefully adjust and assign rails to different components, major components, you'll have less ripple, you're going to have less droop, you're going to have a cooler running PSU, and possibly a longer lifespan on all of your parts. So it's single rails have been popular since you could just plug stuff in and it works, but there are definite advantages to having a multi-rail setup. John STF72, do you think it would be wise for NVIDIA and AMD to produce mining-specific cards to appease the miners and bring the gamer GPUs down to more sensible prices than we have right now? It's been a big debate. And in the end, I think we may see a small selection of SKUs that will be miner-centric, but I don't think NVIDIA and AMD really have much interest in pursuing that, just because the gaming market is pretty consistent. The mining market is not. It's hot right now. Well, it's becoming less hot right now, but you tend to see boom and bust cycles in cryptocurrency at a much greater rate than what you see for just regular gaming market. So they may talk about doing it, but I don't think that we're going to see anything more than just a couple of SKUs that are not going to, branch off to, discrete mining GPUs. They will probably allow their partners to do such things, but I don't think that we're going to see, a bifurcation of the GPU market. And it's like this production's going for games, it can only be used for games, and this production's going for mining, it can only be used there. So I think we're all just kind of waiting out for the next bust to happen, and it looks like it's possibly happening soon, and which leads us to the Uncle Julian's question. It seems the price of Bitcoin has been steadily dropping the past 1.5 months. If the trend continues, how long do you think it will take for the price of GPUs to follow? If there's a bust and we see a ton of cards on eBay, and the manufacturers, the partners, and probably most importantly, the Newegg's and Amazons and BNN photo guys, they will take notice that their cards are not moving at the prices that they have them at. Now, there's probably no way that Newegg, Amazon, these other guys who buy the graphics cards from the partners like MSI, Asus, PowerColor, whoever, they're not getting charged really anymore for these products, but they have raised the prices because demand is so high that they're making more money. They're kind of slowing down the buying, so they actually have stock. And it's kind of interesting little economics there. But if there's a ton of cards put on Amazon, not Amazon, but eBay and Craigslist, and people are buying from there, it will be very quickly noticed by the retailers that they're just not selling cards, and they're going to drop their prices as fast as they can to be able to move inventory, because moving inventory, it's kind of an important thing for their business. So those are all the questions. I ran way long, 28 minutes so far. So sue me. Don't, please, because I can't afford it. But yeah, that's our mailbag for this week, the week of February 9th, 2018. This was mailbag number 30. I'm Josh Walrath, and we'll see you again soon.